The most dangerous number in your trading account may not be your loss. It may be your salary. Not because earning a salary is a weakness. Quite the opposite. A salary is built on regularity. You work, time passes, and compensation arrives on a schedule. Trading has no such agreement with you. Yet without realizing it, you may carry the logic of a paycheck into a place where the market has never promised to pay you every week, every month, or even every quarter. That difference sounds simple. It is not. When you earn a salary, consistency of effort is usually connected to consistency of compensation. In trading, effort and reward can separate completely. You can study carefully, wait patiently, follow your rules and still take a loss. You can also make a poor decision and be rewarded temporarily. That is what makes the market such a difficult teacher. It does not always punish bad behavior immediately, and it does not always reward good behavior on demand. So the real conflict between salary and trading profits is not merely about how money is earned. It is about what you expect money to do. A paycheck encourages a calendar mentality. Monday begins the work. Friday ends the week. The month closes, bills arrive, income is expected. But the market does not know that your rent is due. It does not care that you have traded for 20 days without meaningful progress. It has no obligation to provide an opportunity simply because you are ready to make money. And when you forget that, pressure enters your decisions. You begin looking at the market and thinking, perhaps without saying it aloud, I need to make something today. That single thought can change the character of your trading. A mediocre setup begins to look acceptable because waiting feels unproductive. A small loss becomes harder to accept because you were expecting income. A profitable position may be closed too early because you want to turn an uncertain gain into something that feels like a completed paycheck. Because follows expectation. If you demand regular income from an irregular environment, you will eventually feel compelled to manufacture trades. And manufactured trades are usually not responses to opportunity. They are responses to personal financial pressure. That is why one of the first disciplines a serious trader has to develop is the ability to separate financial needs from market conditions. This does not mean trading cannot produce profits. It means profits arrive according to opportunity, execution risk, and uncertainty, not according to your preferred schedule. There may be periods when conditions suit your method and periods when the correct action is to do very little. The difficulty is that doing very little can feel irresponsible when your mind has been trained to associate activity with earning. But consider the contradiction. If your employer paid you for showing up, activity made sense. If the market only rewards certain decisions under certain conditions, and even then without certainty, why should constant activity deserve compensation? It should not. That changes the question you need to ask yourself. Instead of asking, how much can I make this month? You begin asking something more demanding. What conditions would justify putting my capital at risk at all? That shift sounds small, but it changes how you think about patience, position size, monthly expectations, withdrawals, and even the meaning of a successful trading period. And this is where the comparison between salary and trading profits becomes much more important than income alone. Because once you understand what a paycheck trained you to expect, you begin to notice how deeply those expectations may already be influencing the way you trade. A salary teaches you something so quietly that you may never notice it happening. Time begins to feel connected to payment. You work through the week, and compensation follows. You complete another month, and another payment arrives. After enough years, the mind starts treating this rhythm as normal. Effort goes in. Money comes out. Then you bring that expectation into trading. The market does not operate on that agreement. You can spend 5 days studying carefully and receive nothing from it. You can sit through an entire week without seeing conditions that justify a trade. The passage of time creates no claim on profit. That is where frustration begins. If you expect trading to pay you because another week has passed, the absence of profit starts feeling like something has gone wrong. You stop seeing the market as it is and begin judging it against a schedule that exists only in your mind. And once you believe you should be earning, patience becomes harder. A quiet market feels unproductive. An ordinary setup begins to look more attractive. You may not tell yourself that you are forcing anything. You simply become a little more willing to see opportunity where none was clear before. So watch the expectation before you watch the trade. When Friday arrives, do you feel the week should have produced something? When a new month begins, do you quietly expect the account to behave like a paycheck? Because once that expectation takes hold, the calendar starts influencing decisions the market never asked you to make. And that leads to a deeper problem. What happens when your trading money is no longer just trading money? Money behaves differently in your mind once you need it for something outside the market. A trading account may begin as capital you are prepared to expose to uncertainty, but the moment part of that capital becomes responsible for rent, food, or another necessary expense, its meaning changes. The dollars are the same. Your relationship with them is not. Now every fluctuation carries two consequences. A loss is no longer simply a business result. It may represent something you already need elsewhere. Because of that, normal uncertainty starts to feel personal. You are no longer observing only what the position is doing. Somewhere in the background, you are also calculating what that movement means for your life. That pressure can alter judgment before fear becomes obvious. You may hesitate where you once acted clearly. You may become overly protective because capital cannot be comfortably replaced. Or you may feel an increased need for the trade to work because the money already has another purpose waiting for it. Ask yourself a harder question. If this capital declined, would the loss change only your trading account, or would it immediately change how you live? That distinction matters because capital cannot serve two masters comfortably. Money expected to survive market uncertainty is being asked to remain flexible. Money required for necessary expenses is being asked to remain available. When those demands are placed on the same funds, the conflict does not stay inside the account. It enters every decision, and eventually, it begins giving time a pressure of its own. The market does not become easier because the month is ending. Yet the final days of a month can change the way you see your results. A small gain may suddenly feel too small. A modest loss may feel unfinished. The calendar creates a boundary, and the mind begins wanting the account to look respectable before that boundary arrives. But a month is useful for accounting. It is not a market condition. Price does not know that you are approaching the 30th day. Opportunity does not increase because your records are about to close. When you confuse a reporting period with a performance deadline, an artificial problem enters the trading process. Suppose you are slightly negative with 3 days left. Nothing about the market has necessarily changed, but your awareness of the number has changed. Now a trade can carry an extra purpose, not simply to respond to conditions, but to repair the month. That additional purpose matters. The moment a trade is asked to improve a calendar result, you are no longer judging it on its own merit. The month begins competing with the market for your attention, so keep the distinction clear. Use weeks, months, and quarters to organize records and study behavior, but notice when measurement quietly becomes obligation. Because once you believe every period must contain enough visible progress, another temptation appears: the need to stay active simply so you can feel that you are doing your job. There are days in trading when the hardest work produces no visible action. You study the market, compare conditions, watch price develop, and then decide there is nothing worth doing. For someone trained by ordinary work, that can feel strangely uncomfortable. We are used to proving effort through completed tasks. Something gets answered, built, delivered, or finished. Trading does not always reward that instinct. Sometimes the most disciplined decision leaves no evidence behind. No order is placed. No position appears on the screen. Nothing happens that makes the day feel productive. That emptiness can create a subtle problem. Once inactivity begins to feel like wasted time, your standards can start moving without your permission. A setup that looked weak an hour ago begins to seem acceptable. A market you would normally ignore becomes interesting simply because you have been watching it long enough. The market has not improved. Your tolerance for doing nothing has weakened. That distinction is important. You are not necessarily acting because you see something better. You may be acting because action itself gives relief. Pressing the button ends the discomfort of waiting and gives the day a visible result. So pay attention to what happens inside you during quiet periods. Can you remain engaged without needing participation to prove that the session mattered? Because if trading is ever expected to become more than an occasional pursuit, this conflict between productive work and visible activity becomes even more serious. Replacing a salary with trading profits sounds like a numerical problem. It is not. A salary is more than the amount deposited into your account. It carries structure with it. The payment is expected. The timing is known. Your working capital is usually separate from the money you are paid. One bad week at work does not normally reduce the amount of capital available for you to perform the job the following week. Trading combines those things differently. The money you are trying to earn and the capital required to earn it can sit in the same account. Results vary. There is no contract guaranteeing what the next period will produce. So comparing a trading result with a salary figure can hide the real difference between the two. You may look at several profitable periods and think, this could replace my job. But replace what? Only the income number, or also the predictability, routine, benefits, and distance between personal compensation and business risk. That question matters because the wrong comparison creates the wrong expectation. If you expect trading to behave like employment simply because the numbers occasionally look similar, you may build decisions around stability that does not actually exist. The more serious question is whether you are prepared to operate under a different economic structure altogether. And once you see that clearly, another issue appears. If trading profits must reach a certain number, what happens when you start adjusting risk to make that number possible? A dangerous shift happens when you begin with the money you want to make instead of the risk the trade deserves. Suppose you decide that a certain profit would make the month feel worthwhile. From there, the mind can start working backward. If one trade cannot reasonably produce that amount at your normal size, the obvious temptation is to increase the size. Now the target is no longer measuring performance. It is designing the risk. That reverses the proper order of thinking. A trade has its own uncertainty. The distance to an invalidation point, the behavior of price, and the amount of capital you can afford to expose all exist before your desired income enters the picture. But once the profit goal becomes dominant, those facts can begin to look like obstacles rather than boundaries. You may still tell yourself the setup is good. The real question is whether you would take the same position at the same size if there were no monthly number in your head. That is where discipline becomes difficult. A larger position can make an ordinary opportunity appear capable of solving an income problem. But increasing size does not improve the quality of the opportunity. It only increases the consequence of being wrong. And once risk starts being chosen to satisfy a financial target, the next problem becomes unavoidable. How do you judge yourself when a sound decision still ends in a loss? One of the market's hardest lessons is that a correct decision can still lose money. That creates confusion because most of life teaches you to connect good work with good results. In trading, the connection is weaker over short periods. You can follow your method, respect the conditions, make a disciplined decision, and still finish the trade with less money than you started. If you do not understand that distinction, losses begin teaching you the wrong lesson. You start changing sound decisions simply because they failed once. You abandon rules that were followed correctly. At the same time, a careless trade that happens to make money can receive approval it never deserved. That is how results can corrupt judgment. The market can reward bad behavior temporarily and punish good behavior temporarily. So the profit or loss from a single trade cannot tell you, by itself, whether the decision was intelligent. Ask yourself something more demanding. If you could remove the final result from the screen, would you still respect the decision you made? That question separates outcome from conduct. A losing period may contain excellent decisions. A profitable period may contain mistakes that have not been punished yet. The danger begins when money becomes the only evidence you trust. And if profits cannot always prove that a decision was good, then another question follows. When a trade moves in your favor, at what point do you begin treating that uncertain gain as money you already own? A profit can begin influencing you before it is truly yours. The moment a position moves in your favor, the number on the screen starts to feel different from ordinary capital. You may begin assigning it a meaning. This is what I made today. This is what I earned from the trade. But an open profit is still exposed to uncertainty. Once you mentally convert that gain into income, every movement against it feels less like normal market fluctuation and more like money being taken away from you. That change in perception can alter the way you manage the position. You stop asking only what the market is doing. You begin asking how much of your profit you are willing to give back. That is a different question. The gain has now become something you are defending emotionally, even though the trade itself may not have reached the point where your original reasoning has changed. This is why premature ownership matters. The stronger your attachment to the number, the harder it becomes to judge the position independently of that number. Watch the language in your own mind. Do you say, the position is up? Or do you say, I made this much? Those statements sound similar, but they create different reactions. And once trading profits begin to feel like wages the moment they appear, the next danger is not inside the trade itself. It begins when those profits start changing the standard of life you expect to maintain. A strong trading period can change your life faster than it changes your judgment. When profits rise, spending often begins to adjust quietly. A better apartment, a larger monthly commitment, more expensive habits. None of these decisions may feel reckless on their own. The problem appears later when temporary performance creates permanent obligations. Trading income is variable. Expenses are not. Once your lifestyle requires a certain level of profit, the market is no longer just a place where you take calculated risk. It becomes responsible for maintaining a standard you have already chosen. That changes the emotional weight of every month. A normal slowdown can begin to feel like a threat. A flat period can feel unacceptable. You may start comparing current performance not with market conditions, but with the cost of the life that previous profits helped create. That is how success can quietly manufacture pressure. The issue is not whether you should enjoy profits. The issue is whether a temporary increase in income is being mistaken for a permanent increase in earning capacity. Ask yourself, if the next 6 months produced less than the last 6, would your lifestyle still fit comfortably? That question reveals whether your expenses are built on reality or on continuation. Because once variable profits become fixed obligations, you no longer approach the market with the same freedom, and that pressure eventually reaches something deeper than spending, the way you define yourself as a trader. A salaried job can teach you to measure your value by how much work you put in. You arrive early. You stay focused. You complete more tasks. You spend more hours on the problem. In most professions, those things can increase your usefulness. Trading breaks that relationship. The market does not pay you for concentration, screen time, preparation, or effort. Those things may improve your decisions, but they are not the product. The decision is the product. That distinction can be difficult to accept because effort feels morally satisfying. After 10 hours at a screen, you may feel that you have earned some kind of result. But the market has no way to compensate effort directly. It can only expose the quality of the choices you make under uncertainty. This changes what professionalism means. A trader can work extremely hard and still make poor decisions. Another can prepare carefully, recognize that little deserves attention, make one sound decision, and finish the day having done the more professional work. So what are you really measuring when you judge yourself? Hours watched, charts studied, the feeling of being busy, or were your decisions clear, justified, and consistent with what the market actually presented? The shift is subtle but important. Your time still matters because it can prepare your judgment. It simply cannot justify your reward, and once you stop expecting effort itself to be compensated, you are left with a much harder question about trading profits. What, exactly, should count as evidence that you are becoming better at the business